shall I? Okay. Okay, we are here. I'm so excited for our Ask Me Anything. The topic of today's conversation is junior year, what to expect. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Laura Barr. I'm the owner and founder of Emerging Educational Consulting. We provide one-to-one mentorship for students from the beginning to end of the college application process. We are on a mission to raise and launch good humans. So we wake up every day to take students through this process to make it simple, deliberate, and joyful. And that's part of what we'll be talking a little bit about today. Before we get started, I'm going to introduce Hannah. She is my left hand. I say that because I'm left-handed. So she is my left hand. And Hannah, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, I'm Hannah. I am been working with Laura for about 4 years now, almost. It's crazy. And I'm an independent educational consultant and the client manager here at Emerging. So I help out with the students throughout the duration of the process alongside with Laura. And we are just excited to just chat about juggling junior year, balancing the college application process and life. And we have a little bit of an intimate group today. So I would love to see if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and locate the chat and drop those in, and I just put a little blip in there if you guys have anything to add.
We have found that, a lot of people are watching this after the fact. So we kind of just move forward with the questions where that people have asked us ahead of time. So we'll go ahead with that, but we want to answer those people who are actually present. We want to answer your questions first. So even just the three of you who are here right now, if you could just put in the chat the year your student is at this moment, maybe do a rising. So rising senior, rising sophomore, rising, that might be a good way to go. And then another thing we would love is for you also to add perhaps something that a concern or a fear you have if specifically entering junior year, but it could be about anything around the college application process. So I'm going to give you guys a second to write down any fears or concerns. And then we will dive into, I know, Hannah, you have some questions that were pre-asked.
Yes, I do. We got some rising juniors coming in.
Great. And again, if you have any, we may cover some of your questions, but if you have some right in the middle, just go ahead and ping them in. Go ahead, Hannah. Why don't we get started and then we can weave in a response to some of the fears that come up.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first question is, where do you even begin? Which I know is loaded, but where do people that have rising junior students even begin?
Well, it's a great question because I think I do this a little bit differently than other practices in that I'm really trying to think about the student experience through the junior year. And I'm also imagining that when they start their senior year, the amount of work, anticipation, the balance that they have, and the amount of work that has to be completed by around November 1st to November 15th of their senior year. So for me, the teacher in me is always like, we got to backwards plan that. Like if we look at November 1st as a deadline, and actually for free day in Colorado, it's October 17th. So I think, okay, students are going to start their senior year. They have all of this work that's done. And so I really think back to how much work they're going to have to do during that year, and to make sure that throughout that process, they have little things to do over time. So every timeline will be a little bit different. And I know, Hannah, you have a timeline you can maybe dump in. Yeah. People want to have that, but every timeline is going to be a little bit different. But from the beginning of that junior year experience, we are game on. We are working on their resume, their activities list. We start really creating that balanced college list, which I'll get into a little bit more. But that whole idea of like, how much time do we have? And some students who are swimmers or athletes or a pom team, those students a lot of their minutes are already filled to the brim. So the more that we can do these little things throughout the process, the more we can reduce some of that stress. Next.
Okay. And then because that's such a packed year that you spoke about, junior year being just pretty rigorous, managing that stress, how can juniors be successful with managing stress of junior year on top of college applications?
Right. Well, I mean, I think the whole idea around stress and students today, we had that great talk with Dr. Dillon about managing anxiety and stress. In general, I think I want students to, from the beginning, to have open conversations about what stress means to them, what their idea of like balance even looks like. And different students can handle different levels of stress. Some students use stress to propel them. Some students are debilitated by it. What I find most that causes the most stress, and I remember Dr. Dillon did such a good job about talking about this, is procrastination. So the absolute biggest way that I think we in our practice manage stress is by getting things done. And it is amazing how we can see their faces as they finish and have like 5 assignments done by often some of these kids in their junior year are already done with 5 or 6 statements. We have some kids that are I have some students that are rising seniors right now who have chosen to put some things off and are going to put their efforts towards the summer. And for me, that works because the stress that it caused them to have to manage their sports and everything else wasn't worth the trade-off. The whole idea is to make this process as simple, deliberate, and joyful as possible. And so we really often have to look at each student. At the same time, I do think we are also unique in our practice because we do hold our students accountable. So we don't wait for them just to turn it in. I mean, Hannah's like, oh, I gave you that assignment a week ago. You said it was going to be done the 13th. Like, where is it? And if not, you need to renegotiate with us because your editor is waiting, right? So we really push that completion along, but we also meet our students where they are. And then obviously there's things like our students managing their other mental health issues with either their therapists or just talking about it. While we say we're not therapists, we often, our model of being a village for raising and launching students works really well because they often share with us their stress and anxiety. And part of our practice and the training that I provide for all of my mentors is like, what are some things you can do? Are you breathing? Do you have a breathing practice? Do you practice mindfulness? And we weave that in. If we do think or extra concerned about a student, we reach out to parents, those kinds of things.
Absolutely. Miss Samantha just asked, well, she said her biggest fear is bridging the gaps that so many of our kids experienced over the past few years. I'm assuming this is relating to COVID, possibly.
Yeah. I'll answer that. I actually just got off a call with a professor at William and Mary who is an essay reader. And he was talking to me about how many colleges have frankly just had to adjust their freshman year experiences, and they're scrambling to be able to help provide those, to help provide some of that gap. Yeah. And also I think it's making it more complicated in selectivity because there's some schools that aren't making those accommodations. So it has, I think, if students aren't able to compete academically, then there is consequence. And I think that's something that's hard for families to be able to have to manage and to face. But one way that I have helped mitigate some of that is to use kind of the SAT, ACT process as a time to both tutor and prepare for that kind of test taking. Yeah. And that has been pretty successful, I think. I also think that our process of like holding kids accountable for just the work and the writing that they have through our process. I had a really neat session with a parent who was like, well, I want to hire an English tutor because my school doesn't actually provide books. They literally are not reading books freshman and sophomore year. And she's like, I need my student to have a curriculum. I'm like, well, wait, hold off, because I don't really know if you need to hire that, because part of our process is we want them to be reading some narrative writing. So
Right.
as a sophomore, let's start with Born a Crime by Trevor Noah and get that, read that. We're going to talk about it. What do you notice? What do you wonder? And how can we begin writing about ourselves in a way that will propel you forward in the narrative writing process that's required in the college application process? So there's a lot of ways to weave in those gaps. But the other thing is, frankly, is like we need baselines. Like to be able to grow, we need to know where each student is on a quantitative assessment that tells us where is your student. So that could be a proctored ACT, a proctored SAT. It could be a psych ed evaluation, those kinds of things. And I think it's pretty important not to put that aside because, you know, as everybody knows who knows me, and I'm looking at this list of people who are here, and these are all my biggest fans who listen to me all the time, say the same things over and over. But I'm like, I want your kids to get into college, but I want them to do well when they get there.
Right. Right. And I think what you just said, you kind of touched on it, is how competitive everything is, and finding a college that's a list that's balanced for students. And I know we get so many questions from parents like the college list, everybody's eager and wants to build it. And so the building the balanced college list is happening right junior year, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. Although when I start with my rising juniors, and we have done personality inventory. They do their first Coursava search. And for those of you who don't know what that is like their first shot at, like, they go through a series of cards. It's like 136 cards, and they have to choose between two different questions: big, small, medium, you know, that kind of thing. Do you want a sports campus? Do you want to be, what geographic area? It's their first shot at kind of even understanding what their options are. And I listen to their interests and their passions, and they change a lot over time. And I'm always just listening for, based on what I know right now and what that student knows about themselves, what are some colleges we can put on that list? I am also unique in that I really believe that list is iterative, and it has to be. And that means iterative, meaning like it's building over time and it changes. The first list is never going to be the last list. And quite frankly, there are colleges that we've added for our rising seniors a month before the application, if not even 3 weeks before. Because often what happens through this whole long process of taking tiny steps over time is that they build their own self-knowledge, their own self-efficacy. They've had a chance to practice and build experiences in the world, either through volunteering or internships or jobs, and they get a little bit more clear about what they want and what they don't want out of that experience. So that list is always changing. But I'll tell you, after this past year, I really want to get the word out and make it really clear to families that the selectivity at the top schools that parents feel like often are the best, and therefore students think that they are the best. I actually am often more up against students than I am parents. Most of the students in our practice are pretty have a strong understanding of what's happening in the world of college admissions. But a lot of these kids are like, oh no, I got to go to Dartmouth, Middlebury, Brown, or Stanford. And I'm like, let's go. I'm like, we will go for it. And I will be there right with you. But you do understand what 4% selectivity means, you know?
Yeah.
And so a lot of what I've been doing lately in building that list is going out into the field and looking at, we call the hidden gems, right? Like, what are schools where we can get a bang for our buck, where we can get incredible education, where kids, it's not, you know, it's not who you know, it's not where you go, is who you'll be. Frank Brunei's wonderful book, but it's more like, what is the experience I have that will lead me to those kinds of things I want to do in my life, as a human being, as an academic, as a friend, as a citizen, right?
Yeah.
So we're very passionate about that. And we're really lucky in the field of college consulting because we have a cohort of unbelievable colleagues who collaborate together. So anyone who is a certified ed consultant who is with HECA or ICA or CEP has an incredible network, and we use each other thoroughly in building these lists.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm rambling, but
No, it's great. And again, just if any questions pop up, just throw them in because we're here for you as well. And okay, I'm just going through what other people have asked previously. So when we're in the process or building the college list, things that juniors could be doing junior year is that demonstrated interest aspect. What is demonstrated interest and what can families and students be doing during that junior year?
I'm always surprised how many people don't really understand demonstrated interest. And I think even we as consultants are learning more and more about what it means post-COVID, because demonstrated interest really is this idea that, in the end, colleges are building a business and they want their seats filled. They want their seats filled. And the way that they're going to fill their seats is they're first going to make sure that students meet the criteria of what their institution requires around GPA, female, male, or transgender, or whatever that, however that plays out. They're going to look at different backgrounds, racial backgrounds, different geographic backgrounds. And then they're going to look to see if that student has shown interest in them. Not all schools require demonstrated interest. So demonstrated interest for schools that track it is a way to build a relationship with the school over time that shows you care and that you are you are on their radar. It's one of your top choices. And the way that you keep demonstrated interest in mind is all throughout the junior and senior year is to be in touch with that college through a variety of ways. That could be through social media. It could be through tracking the emails and making sure we say 3 clicks deep. And those colleges can actually track. We have photographs of their of the screenshots. Like they have a student profile. How many times did a parent call? How many times did the student call? Did they show up to this virtual event? Did they show up to that virtual event? Did they come to campus? Back in the day, going to campus was the true demonstrated interest. That is a little bit different now because of COVID, because there are so many tours, virtual events, and things like that. We have found this to be a challenge for some of our kids, mostly because it's like one more thing for them to do.
Yeah.
And it is rough having to add, like, are you going to be home at 8:00 on Tuesday night? Because if you are, let's sign up for that. And I'll be like, let's sign up for that right now. They're like, oh, I'll do that later. I'm like, oh, no, nope. Open that. Let's put your name in and then make sure you show. And then I'll be like, did the parents see that we made sure that somebody's going to be there? Because I mean, in the end, as a matter of fact, when I was at the Spokane conference, I found this woman from American University and I was like, what is the deal? Like you say, you're 30%, so there's a 30% selectivity rate and none of these students from Colorado are getting in. And they're like, the only way you're going to get into American is to meet our initial criteria, but to be all over demonstrated interest.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really important for parents to understand and students to understand is that demonstrated interest in reaching out to your regional rep like if a school is not actually taking demonstrated interest, that still doesn't, you still can reach out to the regional rep and should.
Yeah.
Because that is just a wonderful way to understand the school more and to build a relationship with somebody who's there to help guide you. So
right.
We often integrate demonstrated interest into what we call our 101 research. We call them lessons within the context of our practice. We call them a 101 lesson. We call it, there's a zoom out and a zoom in and all kinds of ways to research colleges. But every time we have a student pull up a website, we're like, have you entered your name in? These are ways that parents can help as well. I think sometimes I'm just like, listen, if you want to go into their email and start clicking through because it's their top choice, I'm okay with that because it's like, what more can we ask these kids to do? But
it's funny. I had a conversation. We were doing demonstrated interest with a student the other day, and we were looking at Lehigh, and we pulled up the common data set and looked at Lehigh. And I mean, their demonstrated interest is right up there with consideration with test scores. And so that got that student fired up about demonstrated interest. They were like, oh my gosh, I need to be like stepping my game up. So, I mean, it's interesting when you kind of show them the data and they're like, it clicks like, okay, This is a thing.
Yeah, it might be fun for you when the next question that you ask me and I'm talking, maybe to pull up Lehigh's common data set and put it in the chat so people can see what it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be really fun because we always say C7 of any common data set shows you exactly what that college is looking for.
Yep.
And we show students that, and it often helps them, guide them a lot.
Yeah.
All right, what's next?
Well, we also just had a question come in today regarding kind of preparing for the financial aspect. And I guess this is more directed toward the parents that are here funding college, thinking about it, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year. Any tips for parents on that?
Well, actually yes. I mean, I don't even know where to start with this. One of the things that I have in any parent intake, my very first parent intake, I always say one of the things that I have to become your like best friend really fast, because I have to know everything about mental health, your finances, your, financial stuff, because the thing is that I am extremely clear that students who don't have an understanding of their financial situation for college carry a burden and stress. And our culture does a terrible job of guiding parents and students on how to talk about family finances. We don't do it well with each other. We don't sometimes in marriages don't do a good job of talking about finances and how do we manage our kids, and then how do we manage our own hopes and dreams. I remember with Devin, we were pretty clear. Like, we have 4 kids. Devin's my youngest of 4. And we were pretty clear, like our budget, there was no way we're paying full price, right? And I remember one day when my ex-husband, sweetest guy in the whole world, I mean, I adore him. He was like, Devin, if you get into Brown, I'll find a way. I was like, where are you going to find that way, my friend? Like, but even us, like even the most rigorous college consultants, everything, that moment of like, my son should have a shot at Brown and I will pay for it. He didn't apply. And in the end, all of the schools he got into did not give him money. And I was personally shocked because I thought he walked on water, and only one school gave him money. And it's funny, he was just here yesterday for 24 hours and he told me, Mom, I'm going to the Presidential Scholarship Luncheon.
Oh.
So he's graduating in a week and he got the Presidential Scholarship at the one school that gave him money, and that's where he went. And that's how we made the decision. So that's number 1. Number 2, I'm coming to terms with that. I really feel like families should have a financial planner that they can trust and that they can use consistently to help create those systems in place, because I think a lot of families just don't even have even know how much money they have or don't have, or how they can save money on taxes for 529s, if loans are a good idea or not, or if so, which ones.
Right.
So that is something I'm actually working to create some relationships in my practice, so we have some really go-to people, one of which is, I believe, on this call. So I think that is something I look forward to being able to offer more to families. But everybody should fill out the FAFSA for the most part. That usually comes out October 1st. I think, and I could go on and on. There's also the CSS profile, all of those things. And we have a lot of information in our gold mine in Circle for those of you who want to access it. And we're happy to answer questions and make referrals to people who might need that.
Absolutely.
But in the end, I think, sorry, I'm really rambling because I even have a hard time articulating this, but the bottom line is the student needs to know if you're going to pay or not and how much, because it is torture for these kids. I have one student who has, and it's actually a relative of mine, so it's a little awkward in my situation, whose parent will not tell them how much she will pay. Mm-hmm. And this student is in agony because she's like, I don't know what I should apply to. I don't know. Her mom just says, we'll figure it out, but she doesn't know what that means.
Right.
And it is rough to watch.
That's rough. Okay, Denise just asked, what are the top 3 ways that parents can support our children in this process without overstepping? There's the kicker.
It's a good question. Let me think about that for a second.
Sure.
Top three. I really like the question without overstepping. It reminds me a little bit. I mean, one way is to hire somebody to help you do it and to trust that process. And the process that I've created as a helicopter mother in recovery is that be backstage, right? Let your student be on the front stage and be the star of the process, but you be behind the stage when they come off and they like need the costume change. It's like, let me help you. I'm here. I often think about it as the guardrails, right? Like parents' job often is to really be there to support. I think there are so I think that's number one, is to really just be guardrails and to take that back seat. And if you hire someone, you don't have to be all over them. Right. And to trust that their process is going to work and to trust us that our process works. We have never in our whole history of our practice not had somebody get their application in on time, which maybe also be part of the reason we start early because we're like, what to do?
We're not missing this.
We're not going to miss this deadline. So that would be one. I think two, I do think there's little things like that demonstrated interest. If there's pieces of helping navigate schedule and timing, sometimes we have to say to parents, like, listen, we want your students to be the ones to schedule, but in the end, they don't really do it. Right. Most of them don't.
Right.
And we're used to that. So we're like, please help us schedule. And if you don't have a college consultant and you're here today listening, or you're, going to be listening later, I think really following a timeline, like having a project in a timeline.
Right.
I think another way to help is to, again, make sure those students really know what their budget is so that they have clear expectations so there's no disappointment. And then also asking your student, like, what do you need from me through this process? And then honoring it. I remember people used to say to me, like, oh, do that Sunday night. Like,
that's what I was just going to say. You usually say the Sunday night.
Rolled their eyes at me and never would talk to me. So I just was like, I guess in the end, this is your deal. Yeah. Right. And maybe just letting go sometimes is a relief. They feel your stress. They feel it. I mean, even Devin right now, he called me yesterday. He's like, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. I'm not going to graduate from college. I have 1 week left and I'm not going to get my finals done. And I was like, well, this or that. He's like, well, I didn't want advice, Mom. I just wanted someone to listen to me. I was like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm like, okay, I'm quiet now. Yeah. So I really
don't we all go through that? We all go through those.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, is there any other? I have one more. Let's see. Sorry. Oh, good. She liked all those points.
I feel like I could ramble on. And if you ask me tomorrow, they might be different. But
what about, so the other thing is rejection. Maybe, is it, are we even thinking about preparing for rejection junior year? Or is that more of a kind of preparing for, I don't know, just the big step, the big launch that's coming, and the possibility?
I think rejection and failure is a really good conversation to have entering junior year. There's things that come up. My stepdaughter has always had straight A's and has always just like rocked her world. And she's taking a class right now that she's probably going to end up getting a C in for the year. And that's not exactly rejection, but it is disappointment. And it has shocked her and it has shocked her family, because even though nobody said you need to be getting straight A's, there's this like underlying pride. And I think this is happening. We had students in our practice who were number 1 at GW, number 1 at East, and these mostly perfectionist girls, I would say, that were, had spent their entire past 10 years building resumes and going to colleges for classes and just all this stuff. And they all got in to at least one of their very top schools, but that meant 8 rejections other places.
Right.
We're talking Harvard, Princeton, Brown, Georgetown, but it really upset them. And I think it has to be part of the conversation, right? But those are usually things that have to be part of the conversation when they're really young, like when they don't win the state championship, or when, whatever, they don't get that right grade, or their boyfriend breaks up on them. All of those things are part of using that to, what we say in our family systems is break down, breakthrough. Breakdowns, the only way we have breakdowns are breakthroughs, and the only way we have breakthroughs are to have breakdowns, and breakthroughs are life changing. Right. It's okay. So, and we talk about that in our practice a lot. We weave that in.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's 12:31 and I promised 30 minutes and hard stop. So if anybody has any questions, let us know. We're happy
to reach out. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.